Hi, I'm Oliver. I'm in the process of turning my old garage into a woodshop for steam bending sculptures. Like this one and like this one. The step I'm on now is demoing the insulation, and then I'm going to wire all the outlets, and then I'm going to add Rockwool insulation for soundproofing as well as putty pads around the outlets to further help with that soundproofing. The first step is just to thread some 12-2 Romex through all the studs, and that way I can wire my different outlet receptacles to be 20 amps, and hopefully by doing that the breakers won't trip when I'm using multiple tools. I'm also using a few different breakers to wire the garage to further help with making sure that I don't trip my breakers. To start this process, I threaded the Romex through each stud and into the receptacles, and then would cut off the excess. So there's just about 6 to 8 inches of wire for me to work with to actually wire the individual receptacles. The old batting insulation had become really nasty, as over the 60 years the house has been there, I guess it's just slowly deteriorated. And so putting it away was or throwing it in the trash was pretty rough. I initially started without wearing a dust mask, which was really dumb, and so now you can see I'm wearing a dust mask, as I quickly realized how much particles were coming off the insulation. Under the window I hadn't yet drilled out the holes for the Romex to go through, so here I'm marking with a Sharpie where I want the Romex holes to go. Then I tried to drill them out with a right angle bit, but I quickly got stuck in this double 2x4 and had to spend the next, hour or so trying to figure out how to free my paddle bit. Anytime something like this happens where I have a tool doing what it should do, but something frustrates it and it's jammed, it always reminds me of the case study in Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, where he describes working on a motorcycle, and instead of applying the right amount of force on a screw, he applies too much force and strips the screw, turning a relatively manageable problem into a very difficult, frustrating problem. And it's trying to explain how if you're not in the right mindset to work on a problem, you don't just fail, but you overwhelmingly degrade the situation, where something should be a relatively minor task ends up becoming a very huge ordeal. And that he even kind of goes to talk about how you then have to go and order the part, and you have to look through the different catalogs to find the part, and then you got to wait for the shipping. So thankfully I didn't have to go to the store to go and get a new paddle bit or anything, although I will have to get one because this one is now chipped on its edge. But yeah, the real battle is often internal and not really mechanical with what you're dealing with. You can see how it's 3 studs I'm trying to drill through. I do think there was some nails that were holding those together, and that was what I got caught on with my paddle bit. This was an interesting part of drilling out because those two 2x4s are so close together, I couldn't get my drill bit in between them, so I had to use a long apex extender to actually get the distance I needed, and then thread the paddle bit in and put my drill in there. After that, the rest of the drilling wasn't too bad and just kind of went through and did it. And then I was back to threading Romex and finishing up the rest of the receptacles. And now I'm starting to thread my Romex through that hole that gave me so much trouble. This is also on the other wall of my wood shop. And once I get it through all the holes in the studs, I just thread it through the receptacle box. After finishing that wall, I started to install my outlets in my ceiling. I'm putting 4 outlets into the different corners of my ceiling so that hopefully I will have no trouble getting electricity anywhere in the shop. I decided to screw the receptacle boxes into the stud rafters above the ceilings. That's what I was doing there. And then once the outlets in the ceiling were wired, I threaded the Romex back down from the ceiling to this outlet that's kind of far away from the rest of the outlets. Because there are no other outlets on this wall, I decided to do a double outlet box here to make sure that I could have enough plugs. And if you wanted to know how to wire a outlet, all you do is cut the ends off of the black hot wire and the white neutral wire. And because this is 2 outlets, I have to take each wire and use a wire nut to add 2 leads to each of the wires, and that'll allow me to give power to both outlets and not just one outlet. Then I'm arranging the wires so they're on the right side, making it a little bit easier to screw it into the leads. And there I am, screwing into the 20 amp outlet. Then you just kind of press it into the receptacle box, and that tells the wires how to fold, and it allows you to then be able to screw them in. Next on the list, because I had already threaded all the wires, was to just go through and start installing the individual outlet receptacles. Sometimes people ask me what I'm up to, and I'll tell them I'm either, reinforcing my basement with steel or I'm wiring my garage. And they're always so amazed or impressed about wiring because of the electricity aspect, and they're just kind of flabbergasted on how I could ever approach something like that. And it kind of amazes me how when you don't know anything about something, it seems really esoteric, but after you've done it a few times, it's really just so easy and commonplace. Eventually I got to the last outlet on my walls, the one under the heater, and I just had to install it. Then I could start working on the 4 outlets in the ceiling. I was pretty excited to have outlets in the ceiling because both at my college wood shop and the local community shop in my city has outlets in the ceiling, and so I've always really appreciated just the easy access to electricity that affords whenever you really wouldn't expect you need it there, but you do. Once all the outlets were installed, I was now ready to have my electrical inspection. So I had that scheduled, and the inspector came out and passed all the electrical work I had done. He also told me what further I needed to do to pass the final inspection for both electrical and building. One of the things the inspector told me I needed to pass the final inspection was anywhere the house and the garage shared a wall, that drywall needed to be 5/8 thick. So whereas the rest of the garage could be 1/2 inch thick, and I could leave that extra foot of drywall coming down, keeping the exposed parts to 8 feet, and I can use just 1 vertical sheet of drywall or 2 horizontal sheets of drywall. For all of the walls touching the house, I would have to have a extra little foot runner of drywall that's 5/8. I had really hoped to be completely done with demoing, but problems and tasks have a way of coming back and never really being complete, and this is just one such example of that. Fast forward to finishing the demo, I could now start insulating the walls, which was very exciting. I chose to go with Rockwool for the hopeful sound barrier. I'm really wanting to be able to use all my power tools in the morning without bothering or waking anyone up. So I tried to go with the best soundproofing and densest insulation I could find. I found that using just a cheap steak knife from the Dollar Tree is actually the perfect tool for cutting Rockwool, and that's all I'm using there, and it works out great just with a serrated edge. Because I'm trying to do all this soundproofing stuff, I also bought some Putty Pads, which is primarily designed for fire blocking, but it also helps with soundproofing by adding an extra barrier where all of those hollows are, where the outlet box and the drywall meets. It just kind of is a nice little sound block. Thanks for watching me in my process to turn my garage into a woodshop for making sculptures. Up next, I'll actually be hanging the drywall and getting the final inspection. Bye.